Derekh Chamblee, broadcasting from Chamblee, Atlanta. It's March 29th, 2017. Again with an edition of Cy Colombo, Investigator. Follow the money. This is Derekh Chamblee, CyberCitizen Network. And we mentioned earlier a letter from Democratic Senator from Oregon, and how it reminds you of follow the money in the investigation of Watergate. And if you go to Wikipedia, there's an entire section called the Money Trail, and I'll just read a little bit. On June 19th, 1972, the press reported that one of the Watergate burglars was a Republican Party security aide, former Attorney General John Mitchell, who at the time was the head of the committee to re-elect the president, denied any involvement with the Watergate break-in or knowledge of the 5 burglars. On August 1st, a $25,000 cashier's check earmarked for the Nixon re-election campaign was found in the bank account of one of the Watergate burglars. Further investigation by the FBI would reveal the team had thousands of dollars more to support their travel and expenses in the months leading to their arrests. Examination of their funds showed a link to the Finance Committee of the committee to re-elect the president. And it's a lengthy section here on the money trail in the Watergate scandal, and this money trail leading eventually back to operators out of the White House and a slush fund in the safe of E. Howard Hunt in the White House itself. The particular I'll continue to read from Wikipedia here. The checks deposited into Barker's bank account were endorsed by committee treasurer Hugh Sloan, who was also authorized by the Finance Committee. At one point, Deep Throat instructed, as I said before, the reporter Bob Woodward of the Washington Post to follow the money, and at one point, Woodward and Carl Bernstein, another reporter from the Washington Post, were able to have a series of interviews with Hugh Sloan, the treasurer, and at one point there, Sloan began to reveal the links to the White House and this particular slush fund, which ultimately, when one of the President Richard Nixon's tapes was turned over, ultimately his discussion with one of his aides, I believe it was Bob Haldeman, that it might have been, it was John Dean, who was legal counsel, that it may take $1 million, basically blackmail those Watergate participants, burglars, $1 million for their silence. And President Richard Nixon said, $1 million, I know where we can get that. I know where that can be gotten, something to that effect. And that was one of the so-called smoking guns. This is Derekh Chamblee, broadcasting on a beautiful day, March 29th, Wednesday, 2017, Chamblee, Atlanta, the next great American city, Battleground Zero, the epicenter of the 2017 civil defense of the United States of America. Cy Colombo, investigator, Derekh Chamblee, CyberCitizen Network. Follow the money. Thank you very much.
This is Derekh Chamblee, broadcasting from Chamblee, Atlanta, the next great American city, Battleground Zero, the epicenter of the 2020 presidential campaign and election. CYRADYO, CyberCitizen Network around the world. It's winding up on 2 o'clock in the morning. It's April 9th, 2020. April 9th. 2020, And that was an excerpt from 3 years ago on March 29th, 2017, Cy Colombo investigator, and ultimately, when the special counsel Robert Mueller was appointed to investigate any collusion of the Trump campaign in 2016 to win the election with Russia. In our other broadcasts in 2017, we projected that Robert Mueller would exonerate our current president of collusion in his campaign with collusion with Russia, and that came true, and that the Democratic Party was wasting their time trying to lay some sort of foundation for the impeachment of our current president based on the Mueller investigation. We also revealed how Special Counsel Robert Mueller, appointed by, at that time, Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein, who was his assistant when he was FBI director prior to 9/11 and just after 9/11 under former President George W. Bush, and how Robert Mueller, as FBI director, covered up the involvement of former President George W. Bush and his brother, Governor of Florida, Jeb Bush, in the movements of the pilots throughout the state of Florida, including Tampa, training in the airfield south of Tampa, that they knew of their movements and even aided them in their setting up of their training, and that the particular movements that they had through the city of Tampa and the support they got there from a sort of soft cell Muslim mosque in North Tampa to get them driver's licenses, apartments, anything they needed, was withheld from the 9/11 commissioners, George W. Bush and Jeb Bush. Put Special Counsel Robert Mueller in there to control the intel as director of the FBI, to control that intel so it would not reach the 9/11 commissioners, and it was omitted from the 9/11 commissioners' report. And to this day, the former senator, U.S. Senator from Florida, Bob Graham, says it's hard for him to believe that they did not get domestic support to pull off 9/11. Okay. And so that's what Mueller was called in to do, is cover up to protect the American people, to cover up in the intelligence community, to cover up what Jeb Bush led when he led the anti-Trump Republicans, the never-Trump Republicans, to try to stop the momentum of candidate Donald Trump in 2016. And that was the origin. It was a Jeb Bush PAC committee that funded the British spy that eventually would issue the dossier, and eventually they palmed him off on the Clinton campaign. Okay. So now we're going to fast forward to 2020. And it's April 9th. late at night, winding up on 2 in the morning. Derekh Chamblee, CYRADYO, CyberCitizen Network, broadcasting from Chamblee, Atlanta, the next great American city, Battleground Zero, the epicenter of the 2020 presidential campaign and election. We're in the throes of the Great Tribulation here, in the throes of another plague, in the throes of a pandemic. And all we get from, for instance, an article that broke in the Atlantic, Google Entelinter, 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 Atlantic, written by Mr. Frum, F-R-U-M, an editor at the Atlantic. It's all Trump's fault. Oh, really? 13 times early in the article, he said, it's Trump's fault, it's Trump's fault, it's Trump's fault. Wow. At any rate, as we said in other broadcasts, he's supposedly of the Jewish faith. If you Google from the Atlantic in Wikipedia and click onto Wikipedia, something like his great-grandfather, grandfather, something like that, great-grandfather, was an immigrant from Poland, a Jewish immigrant from Poland, but yet he became a speechwriter for former President George W. Bush, and evidently he didn't know that the Bush family, through the grandfather, Prescott Bush, the grandfather of Jeb Bush and George W. Bush, Prescott Bush, funded the financial rise of Adolf Hitler in the 1930s with his associates through banks in France and England, and rearmed Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany all the way till 1943. Was only stopped by the Aid to the Enemy Act of Congress that cut the Bush family off. And it was Prescott Bush that made Richard Nixon in his first run for Congress out of California in 1946, made Richard Nixon. And just Google Nixon, Trump path. Google Nixon, Trump path. Right. So, the effort to impeach the president fell short. As we projected, they would not have the votes to convict him in the Senate. And it's been a diversion of the attention from what we need to do to slow down this particular global pandemic. And this writer from the Atlantic, Frum, F-R-U-M, evidently didn't realize that the Bush family, through Prescott Bush, backed Adolf Hitler in Nazi Germany, being of the Jewish faith. Oh, really? Wow. Maybe he should go back to the drawing board. He said somewhere in the article that in 2016 he voted for Hillary Clinton. Okay, so that's the source of it's all Trump's fault. Oh, really? But really, and to paraphrase a former President, John F. Kennedy, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Ask not. If you're not going to step forward and do something for this nation, to help our current president, yes, then get out of the way. This is Derekh Chamblee, broadcasting from Chamblee, Atlanta, CYRADYO, CyberCitizen Network, April 9th, 2020. Thank you very much.